Hey guys, this one's another topic that's pretty heavy, but it's quite important to address. Also, if you haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird, unless there are some spoilers, so watch out. Now, we all know in the early 1200s, racism was a very prominent problem in the United States, and the southern states especially. A group of 3 million to 6 million people, calling themselves the Ku Klux Klan, was inducing terror into the hearts and minds of colored people around the United States. After the Civil War, which abolished slavery, colored individuals were still discriminated against vastly and in disgusting ways, such as being forced to drink from different water fountains, riding in different buses, and even being lynched. Vigilante lynchings were killing up to 59 people every year. 59 was from 1921. Known as one of the greatest books of American literature, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird was published in July of 1960, and it gives a first-hand look at what life was really like for a young girl in the 1930s in Alabama. It's won a Pulitzer Prize, sold more than 30 million copies, even though the editors say it would only sell several. It was also turned into a very high-budget movie, which won three of its eight nominations for Oscar awards, of course. And it's a very heavy novel. It deals with a great important issue of racism in the 1930s, which is the time period where it's based. And it follows a young white girl named Jean Louise Scout Finch in a small fictional town in Alabama. She spends most of her time with her brother Jim and a summer friend who is also white, of course, because it'd be very difficult for a young white girl to have a friend who is African American. And the white friend's name's Dill, and she also spends most of her time at school, of course. Her father Atticus is a lawyer and is assigned to defend a black man by the name of Tom Robinson. That's an important part of the plot, because it changes Scout's opinions of a lot of things. Now, the life of Scout Finch in this novel is actually really close to Harper Lee's life as a young child. It's so similar, actually, that people have asked the author if it's an autobiography, which it's not. It's just writing what you know, as Harper Lee had said. And the similarities are, in fact, very apparent, even if you just know a simple little bit of Harper's life. She grew up in a small town in Alabama. The Scout did too. These childhood attitudes were very similar to Scout Finch, acting as a tomboy, not really taking the responsibilities of a girl her age. Her good friend Dill, in the book, was also based upon a childhood friend of Harper Lee's named Truman Capote. According to Capote, Arthur Boo Radley, who's a mysterious and often talked about character in the book, was also based on someone who lived down the street from from Truman and Harper. And he actually did a lot of the things that Boo did in the book, like leaving things in the holes near the base of the tree and never actually coming into the house. And if the childhood relations weren't enough, Harper Lee's father was actually also a lawyer, just like Atticus, and also had to deal with a legal case dealing with interracial rape, just like Atticus had to defend. There you go, there's some background on the book. So, like I said before, racism was a massive problem in the early 1900s. And I guess we can agree that things aren't quite as bad as they were back then. Well, I hope. But of course, slavery has been abolished, and people continue to be discriminated towards others. Not even just because they're African American or black, people discriminate based on all sorts of different cultural backgrounds. Religions such as Muslims, atheists, and even sexual orientation, which is actually a relatively new topic in first world countries and stuff. But a study in New York found some alarming statistics when it came to African American racism. 80% of people who are pulled over for driving are black or Latino, and 85% of those people are frisked. Only 8% of white people who are pulled over are frisked. And the prison populations for drug offenses is 57% African American, even though African Americans only make up about 13% of the actual monthly drug users. Police brutality, another big problem in the United States, and it has to do with racism. More black Americans are killed by police than whites, And the police officers, for some reason, are trained to actually kill. There's been many cases when a colored individual has been attacked or killed by an American police officer. And most of these people have been unarmed and either completely innocent or running away from a small crime, like petty theft in the Ferguson, Missouri case in August of 2014, when an unarmed black teenager was shot while surrendering to police officers. He was 18, he died. So back to Kill a Mockingbird. The biggest example of racial inequality is the court scene. The prosecution, Bob and Mayella Awell, accused Tom Robinson of raping Mayella, who was Bob's daughter. Tom didn't, but the prosecution's witnesses say that he did, and the defendant's lawyer, who was Atticus, Scout's father, provided an excellent and very truth-bringing cross-examination which showed that Mayella's injuries weren't quite in correlation with the ones she would have suffered had Tom Robinson actually raped her. It also showed that it was probable that Mr. Evil beat his daughter after seeing her with the colored man. And after a few hours of trying to decide, the jury, who was also made up of 12 white men, came back with a verdict of guilty, even though there was no possible way Tom Robinson was guilty. Now, had Tom Robinson seen the jury from 2015, the verdict had most likely been remarkably different. It would have probably ended with a not guilty verdict and a probable assault charge on Bob Ewell because he beat Mayella. Now, I say it would have probably ended with a not guilty verdict because even in a very multicultural jury with many people from different religions and with different beliefs, there would still be bias involved. With any decision that a human being would be making, there's always going to be some form of bias, whether it's a lot of bias or a little bit of bias. Now, on said jury from 2015, there would probably be at least one African American, at least one person from the background other than the majority, which would be a straight male, I should say, and as well as different religious beliefs, and at least one female. So if there was any bias, it would be minimal due to the broad range of beliefs and opinions that would be. So as I said before, racism has both evolved and improved since the 1930s. And rather than being forced to take different buses and drink from different water fountains, colored people are suspected of crimes more often and prosecuted for crimes they usually didn't commit. And the events we see today aren't as everyday or as big as they were in the 1920s or 30s. But they're still there, and they're still damaging. The only problem is not enough people see what actually happens. Even after they hear stats like what I said about New York, they don't believe it. So how do we get them to actually believe what's happening? Walk them through a prison of mostly African Americans and show them. We've gotten this far after what happens in To Kill a Mockingbird. Racism is still a problem, and if we need to wake people up a little rudely to get us a few steps closer to ending it, maybe it's worth it. Rant over.